What is the GDPR? GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation and applies in the EU from the 25th of May 2018. GDPR was originally intended to create a harmonised approach to privacy laws across the EU. The GDPR protects the fundamental right to the protection of personal data and gives individuals, customers, contractors, employees, transparency and control over the way in which organisations process their personal data. GDPR includes a new requirement to notify the regulator, and sometimes the individual, in circumstances of a personal data breach without delay within 72 hours where feasible. This leads to the granting of new rights for individuals, including the right to be forgotten, data portability, and improving rights under pre-existing data protection law. Organisations must ensure they can handle requests from individuals exercising these rights appropriately and within shorter timescales. The GDPR places new obligations on organisations and introduces into law the principle of accountability. Essentially, organisations must put in place appropriate measures to meet requirements of accountability and have correct governance, records, policies, procedures and practices in place for compliance with GDPR. So who does GDPR apply to? The GDPR applies to data controllers and places statutory obligations directly on data processors. Data controllers decide the purpose and means of processing, and data processors process personal data on behalf of the controller. Therefore, although data processors do not have the same degree of responsibility for the data as data controllers, they can be liable for breaching their obligations under the GDPR. Although the GDPR is an EU law, it sometimes applies to organisations outside the European Economic Area. Are there sanctions for breaking the rules? Yes, GDPR compliance is vital. Organisations could be fined up to €20 million, or 4% of global annual turnover for the previous financial year, whichever is higher. In addition, perhaps more damaging, is the potential reputational harm and restrictions on processing that could be imposed by EU regulators, including ceasing processing of personal data. Overall, the key messages are to raise awareness of new obligations, identify what personal data is processed, classify lawful bases for processing, implement GDPR-compliant notices, governance, records, policies, procedures and security measures.